I know you saw him.
Midnight in the Don's estate was not quiet. It was controlled. There's a difference. The marble floors of the mansion reflected the dim chandelier light like polished ice. Every guard knew his position. Every camera rotated on silent command. Every servant had long retreated to their quarters. In this house, discipline wasn't requested, it was absorbed into the bones. And no one cried here. Especially not in the Don's private kitchen. The kitchen wasn't just a place for food. It was sacred ground. The only room in the mansion untouched by blood negotiations or whispered executions. The Don believed power required ritual, and ritual required solitude. No servant stayed past 10. No exceptions. Yet tonight, a sound broke the order. A muffled sob. Shaking. Desperate. The camera glides past stainless steel counters, past the faint steam of a kettle left untouched, until it finds her. The maid. Her name was Elena, though no one important had ever needed to say it aloud. She was on her knees beside the central island, fingers trembling against the tiles. Her breathing came in fractured gasps like she was trying to swallow panic before it escaped. A bruise darkened along her wrist. A thin line of blood marked the white cuff of her sleeve. But the blood wasn't hers. Footsteps approached. Measured. Unhurried. Heavy with authority. The door at the end of the corridor opened without a creak. He stood there. The Don. Tailored black suit. No tie. Silver hair brushed back with military precision. His expression carried the kind of calm that made grown men forget their own names. He wasn't angry. He wasn't concerned. He was observing. He closed the door behind him softly. Then he turned the lock. The click echoed louder than her sobbing. Elena froze. In this house, a locked door meant one of two things: protection or judgment. The Don walked forward slowly, hands behind his back, eyes scanning the room first, not her. He noticed everything: the kettle left boiling dry, the knife misplaced on the counter, the faint smear on the marble. He stopped 2 feet away from her. "Look at me." His voice was not raised. It didn't need to be. She lifted her face, eyes swollen, mascara streaked like war paint melting under rain. Terror lived in those eyes, but something else was there too. Conflict. "Who touched you?" he asked. Not what happened. Not "Are you all right?" The question wasn't emotional. It was territorial. Elena's lips trembled. Her throat moved, but no words came out. The Don crouched slightly, not to comfort her, but to study her. His gaze shifted to her wrist. Finger-shaped bruises. Recent. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Outside, through the long kitchen windows, headlights passed slowly beyond the estate gates. Too slowly. The Don noticed. He stood upright again and walked to the window. The security lights flickered on automatically, illuminating the driveway. The car was already gone. He said nothing. Behind him, Elena finally whispered something. A name. And in that moment, something changed in the air. Not shock. Not disbelief. Recognition. The name belonged to Victor, one of the Don's most trusted lieutenants. A man raised within the Empire. Loyal since childhood. Practically blood. The Don did not react. He walked back toward her with the same measured steps. "Say it again," he said quietly. She did. And this time her voice cracked, not from fear of Victor. From fear of what would happen next. Silence filled the kitchen like smoke. The Don turned away from her and adjusted his cufflinks. A habit. A tell, though only a few had lived long enough to recognize it. Victor had overseen internal security for 5 years. If the accusation was true, it wasn't just assault. It was a fracture in the foundation. But if it wasn't true, then someone was attempting something far more dangerous than betrayal. Manipulation. The Don picked up the misplaced kitchen knife. He examined it, clean, untouched. "Elena," he said calmly, still not looking at her, "why were you in this kitchen after curfew?" Her breath caught. She hadn't expected that question. I was cleaning," she said. The Don slowly placed the knife back down exactly where it belonged. "No," he replied. "You weren't." Her silence answered him louder than any confession. He turned to face her fully now. In his eyes was not rage, but calculation layered over something colder. "Security footage," he said. 7 minutes missing from the West Corridor tonight. Her face drained of color. "You understand what that means?" She nodded faintly. 7 minutes inside this house was not an accident. It was intervention. The Don stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If Victor touched you, he dies." The words were simple. Absolute. "But if you are lying to me..." He let the sentence hang unfinished. Because in this empire, unfinished threats were more powerful than spoken ones. A phone vibrated in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. A message from external security. Unidentified vehicle paused outside gate at 2341. Plates obscured. The timing aligned perfectly with her sobbing. With the missing footage. With the accusation. The Don looked back at Elena. Her tears had slowed now. Almost as if she were waiting. Not for comfort. For outcome. And suddenly, the Don understood something instinctively. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography. He walked back to the door, unlocking it, but he didn't open it yet. Without turning around, he asked one final question. "Who told you to say his name?" The silence behind him was heavier than the locked door had been. And when she didn't answer, he knew. Somewhere inside his empire, someone had just tested the king. And midnight in his kitchen was only the beginning. The most dangerous thing in a crime empire isn't a bullet. It's a name. And the name Elena whispered in the Don's kitchen was not just any name. It was Victor. By sunrise, the mansion felt different. Still disciplined. Still silent. But beneath the silence, something had shifted, like a crack forming under ice. Victor wasn't just a lieutenant. He was legacy. Raised in the organization after his father died protecting the Don decades ago. He had learned loyalty before he learned language. He handled internal security, interrogations, damage control. If something rotted inside the empire, Victor cut it out. And now, that rot had his name. The Don sat alone in his study as dawn's gray light crept across shelves lined with ledgers and old photographs. He hadn't slept. He replayed Elena's trembling voice in his mind. Victor. The name didn't fit the accusation. That was the problem. A knock at the door. "Enter." Victor stepped inside. Controlled. Impeccably dressed. His expression unreadable, but his eyes sharp, scanning the room the way a soldier scans terrain. "You asked for me," Victor said. The Don gestured for him to sit. They faced each other across the desk, king and commander. "There was an incident last night." The Don began evenly. Victor didn't react. "A servant broke curfew. Security footage from the West Corridor is missing for 7 minutes." Now Victor's jaw shifted slightly. "I'll handle it," he replied immediately. "It won't happen again." The Don watched him closely. "She said you were there." Silence. No flinch. No anger. No defensive outrage. Just stillness. "That's impossible," Victor said. "Not I didn't do it. Impossible." "Where were you at 2341? The Don asked. "In the armory. Inspecting shipment logs." "Alone?" The pause. "Yes." The Don leaned back. "An alibi without witnesses is not an alibi. It's a shadow." Outside the study, whispers had already begun spreading through the mansion staff. No one knew details, but they knew tension. Guards stood straighter. Servants avoided eye contact. When suspicion touches leadership, fear multiplies. The Don dismissed Victor without accusation. "Until I understand what happened," he said, "no one handles this but me." Victor nodded once. Loyal. Obedient. But as he left the room, something lingered in the air, not guilt. Restraint. By afternoon, the Don had security technicians combing through every backup server. The footage from the West Corridor had not glitched. It had been manually erased. Not hacked. Only 3 people had clearance high enough to delete internal recordings. The Don, Victor, and someone who should have been inactive for months. Marco DeLuca. A name from the past. Marco had once been part of the inner council, until he was quietly removed after suspicions of divided loyalties. Officially, he'd retired. Unofficially, he had been exiled from decision-making. Yet somehow, his security credentials had pinged the system at 23:39. 2 minutes before Elena started crying. The Don stared at the report for a long time. The name shouldn't exist in the system anymore. Which meant one thing. Someone had reactivated it. Meanwhile, Elena sat alone in a guest chamber under watch. Not imprisoned. Not free. Protected. Or contained. A female guard stood outside her door. Inside, Elena stared at her own reflection in the mirror. Her bruises looked darker in daylight. Her expression no longer trembled. Her fear had sharpened into something else. Resolve. A soft vibration buzzed from beneath the mattress. She hesitated, then slowly reached underneath. A small burner phone. One message on the screen. Phase 1 complete. Her breathing steadied. Back in the city, word traveled fast. A rival syndicate, the Moretti family, made an aggressive move that afternoon, seizing control of 2 distribution routes that had belonged to the Don's empire for years. Bold. Too bold. As if they sensed weakness. Or were told about it. The Don received the update without visible reaction. But internally, the pattern was forming. Elena accuses Victor. Security footage erased. Marco's credentials mysteriously reactivated. The Morettis moving at the exact same time. This wasn't a random fracture. It was synchronized. He summoned Marco. Marco arrived just before sunset. Older now. Thinner. But his eyes still carried the cunning that had once earned him a seat at the table. You called, old friend? Marco said lightly. The Don didn't offer a seat. Your credentials accessed my security system last night. Marco's smile faded. That's not possible. The Don placed the printed report on the table between them. Marco glanced at it, and for the first time, genuine confusion crossed his face. I haven't had access in months. That's what concerns me, the Don replied. Silence stretched. If someone is using my name, Marco said carefully, then they're not just framing Victor. They're testing you, the Don finished. Testing the king. That night, as darkness settled over the estate again, the Don walked alone through the west corridor where the footage had disappeared. 7 minutes of blindness. 7 minutes where truth dissolved. He stopped outside the kitchen. The same room where Elena had whispered the name that shouldn't exist in this context. He realized something chilling. If Victor was innocent, then accusing him would fracture the inner circle. If Victor was guilty, sparing him would fracture authority. Either outcome weakened the throne. Which meant the accusation itself was the weapon. A distant phone rang in the hallway. An urgent call from city contacts. Another warehouse, burned. The Morettis claiming territory openly now. War was being invited. And it had started with a crying maid in a locked kitchen. The Don looked down the corridor, his expression colder than the marble beneath his feet. Someone inside his empire had orchestrated this with surgical precision. And the most dangerous part? The name Elena whispered wasn't the real target. It was bait. The question was no longer whether Victor was guilty. The question was, who benefits if he falls? And somewhere in the mansion, Elena's burner phone buzzed again. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. The Don felt it now. The storm wasn't coming. It was already inside the walls. In every empire, there are visible enemies. And then there are the ones who never sit at the table. The Don didn't believe in coincidence. Not in missing footage. Not in synchronized attacks. Not in tears that arrived on schedule. So he widened the lens. If Victor was bait, then someone had cast the line. By nightfall, a new set of photographs lay across the Don's desk. Grainy. Long distance. Time stamped over the past 3 weeks. Elena. Outside the estate. Speaking to a man near the old train yard on the east side of the city. The man wasn't one of theirs. Facial recognition came back with a quiet alarm. Luca Moretti. Nephew to the head of the rival syndicate. Calculating. Known for strategy over violence. The Don stared at the image. Elena wasn't crying in the photos. She was listening. Attentively. The room felt smaller. So the maid wasn't just a victim. She was a variable. The Don called a private dinner. Not a meeting. A dinner. Only 3 guests. Victor, Elena, and the Don himself. No guards in the room. No advisors. Just silverware, candlelight, and silence thick enough to suffocate. The long dining table seemed designed for distance. Elena sat at one end. Victor at the other. The Don at the head. The atmosphere wasn't explosive. It was surgical. Wine was poured. No one drank. The Don cut into his steak with slow precision. Elena, he began without looking up, how long have you known Luca Moretti? The fork froze in her hand. Victor's eyes shifted slightly, the only sign he registered the name. I don't know anyone by that name, Elena said carefully. The Don placed a photograph on the table and slid it down the polished surface. It stopped inches from her trembling fingers. She didn't touch it. You met him 4 times in 3 weeks, the Don continued calmly. Train yard. Cafe on Mercer Street. Outside St. Gabriel's Church. Victor's jaw tightened. Elena swallowed. He said he could protect me, she whispered. From whom? Victor's voice cut in, low and dangerous. She didn't answer. The Don leaned back. Protection implies threat, he said. What were you afraid of? Her eyes flickered toward Victor, not in accusation this time. In hesitation. That subtle shift did more damage than any confession. Victor's chair scraped slightly against the floor. You think I'm working with them? He asked, voice steady but edged. I think, the Don replied, that someone wants me to think that. Silence. The candles flickered as if reacting to tension. The Don turned his gaze back to Elena. You accused Victor in my kitchen. She nodded faintly. Why his name? Her breathing quickened. Because it would hurt the most. The room went still. Victor stood abruptly, fury breaking through composure. You lied. She flinched. Yes, she admitted. But not about everything. The Don's eyes sharpened. There are no partial truths in this house, he said softly. Elena's voice cracked, but not from fear now. They told me if I didn't follow instructions, my brother would disappear. The air shifted. This was no longer manipulation alone. It was leverage. Who told you? The Don asked. She hesitated, then whispered, Luca. The name landed like a blade. Victor slowly sat back down, realization replacing anger. The Don folded his hands together. So you were coerced? She nodded. But why accuse Victor specifically? He pressed. Elena looked between them, and for the first time, guilt overtook calculation. Because Luca said, if the Don doubts his own right hand, the empire fractures. The Don didn't react. But internally, pieces aligned. Divide the throne from its sword. Create distrust. Force overreaction. Invite war. This wasn't about assault. It was about destabilization. And Luca Moretti wasn't acting alone. He was too young to design something this layered. There was someone else. Someone who understood the Don personally. After dinner, the Don dismissed them separately. Victor lingered. You believe me? He asked quietly. The Don studied him. Belief is irrelevant, he replied. Only proof matters. Victor nodded once. I'll find Luca. No, the Don said immediately. That surprised him. If you chase him now, the Don continued, you confirm their strategy. Then what do we do? The Don's eyes darkened. We let them believe the fracture is growing. Later that night, Elena sat alone again in her guarded room. Her burner phone vibrated. One new message. Did he react as expected? Her fingers hovered over the screen. She typed slowly. Suspicion between them. She hesitated, then added, but he knows about Luca. The reply came instantly. Her heart pounded. Good. That wasn't part of the plan she'd been told. Before she could type again, another message appeared. Phase 3. Escalation. Her throat tightened. This wasn't just about her brother anymore. This was larger. More calculated. And she was no longer sure who was controlling whom. Across the estate, the Don stood alone in the darkened kitchen again. The same place it began. He replayed every expression at dinner. Every pause. Every flicker in Elena's eyes. She had lied. But she had also been frightened in a way that couldn't be staged, which meant she was both pawn and participant. The hidden player wasn't Luca. Luca was visible, arrogant, ambitious. The real architect was someone who understood psychological warfare. Someone who knew the Don valued loyalty above life. Someone who knew accusing Victor would wound deeper than bullets. The Don's phone rang. An encrypted line. Only 5 people had the number. He answered without speaking. A distorted voice replied, "You've always ruled through fear." The pause. "Now let's see how you rule through doubt." The line went dead. The Don didn't move. He didn't need confirmation. The war was no longer territorial. It was personal. And somewhere inside his empire, the hidden player was watching him react. Waiting. The question wasn't who they were. It was how close they were standing, and whether the Don would discover them before Phase 3 consumed everything. When a king is attacked, most expect war. Gunfire. Retaliation. Bodies in the street. But the most dangerous kings don't strike back immediately. They go silent. And silence, in a criminal empire, is terrifying. The morning after the distorted phone call, the Don did something no one expected. He announced restructuring. No anger. No accusations. No public punishment. Just change. At a private council meeting, he stood at the head of the long oak table, eyes calm, voice steady. Effective immediately, he said, Victor will oversee the Eastern Docks operation. The room froze. The Eastern Docks weren't a promotion. They were a battlefield. The Moretti family had been circling those routes for weeks. 3 warehouses already burned. 2 shipments intercepted. Assigning Victor there meant one thing. If he was loyal, he would prove it in blood. If he wasn't, he would expose himself. Victor didn't argue. He simply nodded. As you command. But beneath that obedience was something sharper now. Awareness. The Don wasn't punishing him. He was testing him. Meanwhile, Elena was quietly relocated to a smaller estate outside the city. Not imprisoned. Not free. But she noticed something unsettling. Her security detail had changed. The new guards weren't the usual household men. They were handpicked by the Don personally, men who owed loyalty to no lieutenant. Isolation within protection. The message was clear. You are still part of this game. That night, her burner phone buzzed again. Why has Victor been moved? The message read. Her fingers trembled. She typed back carefully. He's been sent to the docks. A long pause. Accelerate. Her pulse spiked. Accelerate what? Before she could respond, the phone went dark. Battery removed remotely. She stared at it. For the first time, she felt it fully. She wasn't being protected. She was being managed. At the Eastern Docks, rain fell hard against rusted metal containers. Victor stood beneath the overhang of Warehouse 17, watching his men unload cargo under floodlights. He moved differently here. Sharper. More alert. If someone wanted him exposed, this was the perfect place. Open territory. Constant conflict. He approached his second-in-command. Any unusual movements? He asked. Moretti scouts spotted twice, the man replied. But they keep distance. Victor nodded. Too cautious. As if waiting. He stepped into the warehouse office and closed the door. Inside, he pulled up internal shipment data on a secure tablet. And that's when he saw it. One of the dock shipments tonight wasn't registered under the Empire's books. It had been inserted manually. Authorized. By the Don. Victor's eyes narrowed. A trap within a trap. If the Morettis attacked that specific shipment, it would confirm inside communication. Which meant the Don wasn't just testing Victor. He was baiting the hidden player. Victor almost smiled. So this was how the king hunted. Back at the mansion, the Don prepared something far more dangerous than retaliation. He requested a private meeting. With the head of the Moretti family. An unexpected proposal of temporary truce. The message alone sent shockwaves through the underworld. Why would the Don negotiate now? Unless he was weakened. Unless the fracture was real. The meeting was arranged for midnight in neutral territory, an abandoned opera house long untouched by either side. The Don arrived alone. Or so it appeared. Across the balcony shadows, unseen figures watched silently, not guards. Observers. The Moretti patriarch entered minutes later. Silver-haired. Calculating. Dangerous. You look tired, the patriarch said smoothly. Appearances can be arranged, the Don replied. They sat facing each other in the dusty orchestra pit. I propose a ceasefire, the Don said. The patriarch studied him carefully. In exchange, information. A subtle shift. The Don leaned forward slightly. Someone is using your nephew. The patriarch's expression didn't change. But his silence did. My nephew acts on his own initiative, he replied calmly. Then you are losing control, the Don said softly. A calculated insult. The patriarch stood. Be careful, old friend. Doubt spreads faster than bullets. Indeed, the Don answered. The meeting ended without agreement. But that wasn't the purpose. The purpose was observation. As the patriarch left, one of his security men made a call immediately upon stepping outside. Within minutes, at the eastern docks, the unregistered shipment was attacked. Gunfire erupted. Chaos ignited. But Victor was ready. He had already cleared his men from the marked container. When the attackers opened it, expecting valuable cargo, they found nothing. Empty. Surrounded instantly by armed guards emerging from concealed positions. The attackers were captured alive. And one of them carried something critical. A communication device. Encrypted. Connected internally. Back to a number inside the Don's own network. Hours later, Victor stood before the Don again. Rainwater still clung to his coat. They took the bait, Victor said. The Don nodded once. And? Victor placed the encrypted device on the desk. It routed through our internal servers. Silence. The hidden player wasn't just manipulating Elena. They had access. Deep access. The Don picked up the device slowly. For someone to reroute signals through our system, he said quietly, they need high-level clearance. Victor's eyes darkened. How many people have that? The Don didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. Very few. And fewer still had motive. At that exact moment, a call came from the smaller estate. Elena was gone. No forced entry. No struggle. Security cameras looped. Professional. The Don closed his eyes briefly. Not in frustration. In confirmation. The trap had worked. But so had theirs. The hidden player had escalated. They had extracted their pawn. And now they knew the king was hunting them. The Don looked at Victor. This is no longer infiltration, he said. It's succession. Victor's expression hardened. You think they want the throne? I think, the Don replied quietly, they believe I'm ready to lose it. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. War hadn't begun with bullets. It had begun with doubt. And now, as Elena disappeared into the shadows and the internal breach narrowed toward someone dangerously close, the Don understood. The next move would not be subtle. And whoever was orchestrating this was ready to step into the light. Empires don't fall in explosions. They tremble first. And that tremble begins where certainty used to live. By dawn, the Don's estate no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a chessboard. Guards doubled their rotations. Hallways once silent now carried the faint click of safeties being checked. No one trusted the surveillance feeds anymore. No one trusted internal comms. Because the breach wasn't outside the gates. It was inside the bloodline of the empire. Elena was gone. Security cameras had looped seamlessly. Exit routes were clean. No signs of struggle. It wasn't a kidnapping. It was extraction. And that meant she had been retrieved by someone with access. High-level access. The Don stood alone in his private kitchen again. The same marble floor, the same stainless steel counters. The same room where it all began. He placed both hands on the island countertop and closed his eyes. Not in weakness. In reconstruction. Every move since that first accusation had followed pattern and precision. Accuse Victor. Fracture trust. Provoke restructuring. Force external aggression. Extract the pawn. Now the final objective remained. Delegitimize the king. A soft knock at the kitchen door. Enter. Victor stepped inside. There were dark circles under his eyes now, not from exhaustion, but from calculation. He had been tracing internal clearance logs all night. I found something, Victor said. He placed a tablet on the counter. The Don scanned the screen. A list of access permissions granted over the past 6 months. Temporary overrides. Backdoor reinstatements. And at the center of it, one signature. Authorized digitally under the Don's own encrypted code. The Don didn't flinch. That's impossible, Victor said quietly. Only you have that level of authorization. The Don's voice was calm. Not only me. There was one other person who had ever held that code. One person who knew the internal architecture of the Empire better than any advisor. One person who had been trained not just in operations, but in succession. A slow realization spread between them. Victor exhaled carefully. You think it's him? The Don didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to a small wooden cabinet near the far wall, one that hadn't been opened in years. From inside, he removed a thin black folder. Documents. Photographs. Legal transfers. Private agreements never made public within the organization. He laid them on the counter. Victor's eyes widened slightly. You were preparing transition papers, he said. Yes. The Don met his gaze. My son has been impatient. Silence filled the room. The hidden player wasn't Marco. Wasn't Luca. Wasn't even the Moretti family. They were instruments. The architect was closer. Blood. Across the city, Elena sat in the back seat of a moving car. Her expression no longer uncertain. She had been told the plan from the beginning. Destabilize Victor. Expose internal vulnerabilities. Force the Don into defensive positioning. And at the moment of peak fracture, reveal a new leader who could restore strength. The narrative would be clean. The Don was aging. His decisions reactive. The Empire needed modernization. Control through evolution. Not fear. Elena hadn't known the entire picture. But she knew enough. And now, as the car drove toward a hidden property outside city limits, she wondered whether she had ever truly been a pawn, or if she had just chosen the winning side too early. Back at the estate, Victor paced. If it's your son, he said carefully, why not confront him directly? The Don's expression hardened. Because confrontation confirms suspicion. And silence. Silence forces exposure. The Don picked up his phone and sent a single message. Family dinner. Tonight. Mandatory. No accusations. No warning. Just invitation. The dining hall felt colder than ever before. Candles lit. Seats filled. Senior council members. Trusted captains. And finally, the Don's son. Impeccably dressed. Charismatic. Composed. He kissed his father's cheek respectfully before sitting. You look tired, the son said lightly. So do you, the Don replied. Dinner began normally. Small talk. Business updates. No tension visible on the surface. But beneath the table, currents clashed. Midway through the meal, the Don set his glass down. There has been betrayal within these walls, he announced calmly. Murmurs rippled. The son's expression remained neutral. Security breaches. Manipulated narratives. External coordination. The Don's eyes scanned the table slowly. Someone believed I would not notice. Silence. The son leaned forward slightly. Father, he said gently, with respect, the city is changing. The old methods create enemies faster than they build loyalty. A subtle challenge. Public. Calculated. The Don studied him. You think fear is outdated? I think control requires adaptability, the son replied smoothly. Across the table, council members exchanged uneasy glances. This was no longer subtext. It was positioning. The Don reached into his jacket and removed the black folder. He placed it on the table. These are succession drafts, he said. Shock flickered across multiple faces. Even the son's composure faltered, just slightly. I intended to step back in time, the Don continued. But I will not be replaced through manipulation. The son's eyes sharpened. I don't know what you're implying. A distant sound interrupted them. A gunshot. somewhere outside the estate. Every guard in the room reached instinctively for their weapons. Chaos threatened to ignite. The Don didn't move. Neither did his son. They held eye contact. Testing. Measuring. The gunshot wasn't random. It was signal. And in that suspended moment, the Empire trembled. Not because of external war, but because father and heir now stood on opposite sides of legitimacy. The Don finally spoke, voice low and absolute. "If you want the throne," he said quietly, "take it openly." No one breathed. The son's jaw tightened. Outside, engines roared to life. Something was unfolding beyond the gates. And as armed men flooded the courtyard, unsure whose orders they followed, the Empire felt its foundation shake. The story does not end with the gunshot. It ends with uncertainty, with a king who knows the architect, with a son who may already have prepared his final move, and with an empire forced to decide, loyalty to legacy, or loyalty to power, because when blood challenges the throne, only one leaves the table standing.